Welcome to the Grappling Rewind podcast.
Welcome to this week on the Grappling Rewind podcast. In this week's show, we are going to talk about Marcelo Garcia versus Terere in 2003, Roger versus Jacare in 2004, Buchecha versus Rodolfo Vieira in 2013, Cobrinha versus Rafa in 2014, and Mackenzie Dern versus Nicolini in 2015. As always on the show, I'm your host, Maine, joined by co-host
Josh
and
Zach.
So, caveat here, this show is being done when we are all quarantined in Maryland. We're not really quarantined, but I didn't want people over my house because I didn't want to get coronavirus. So this is going to be, again, a significantly different show than what is standard on the Grappling Rewind. Typically, we are in person and not via Skype, but we want to continue to bring you guys content while everyone is under lockdown and in quarantine and going through whatever it is you're going through. So we picked some really awesome matches that the team wanted to talk about as a retrospective for this week, but the audio is not going to be the quality that you're kind of used to on the show because we are all remote. I literally dropped a mic off at Zach's house, knocked on his door, and waved to him. I was like, "Take this mic. I'm not going to touch you." And Josh
scurrying out my window.
Yeah, as I kind of do. So before we get into that, let's talk about news. There is no news because everything is closed. Every gym is closed. Every place of business is closed. Maryland closed down. Everything that is non-essential. So there's 8 things that are open, like gas stations, liquor stores, grocery stores. Everything's closed. Nothing's happening. Everyone's working from home or not working. It is a strange time. Oh, also on the show, we have an interview with David Aguzzi, the CEO and coordinator for Grappling Industries. He gave us about a 35-minute interview talking about basically everything Grappling Industries is doing leading up to the coronavirus, what they've canceled, what they're working through, and how they're dealing with that. Some things for the future in Grappling Industries, as well as some of the history behind some of their super fight matchups, and a lot of questions that I've wanted to talk to David about for a long time, so it was really cool that he gave us an interview on this week's show. I am all over the place today for news.
I don't know if I would call that news, but yeah, sure.
I mean, it's at the end of the episode.
The news is you're going to get news on the show later.
Basically, yeah. So there's absolutely nothing happening. Do you guys have anything else that you've come across for news, Josh or Zach?
It's not news, but it's interesting. I heard someone was running closed door, locked door, open mats, and the fire marshal in Maryland showed up and fined him $3,000 per head.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I don't know exactly where, but that's the rumor.
Are we talking about the same thing that our mutual acquaintance talked about?
Yeah.
Okay, that wasn't an open mat. That was at just like a
regular, I guess not regular thing. Yeah, regular gym. But we're training.
Very interesting.
So
I didn't know that actually. So I'm actually curious. I'll talk to you out for air. I want to figure out who that was.
No, my point was less to throw anyone under the bus and more just point out that, things are real. A lot of these lockdowns that places are individual states are putting up are very serious and should probably be taken seriously because there's consequences. Stay
home. People die. If you don't stay home, people die. It's literally a thing. Look at the data coming out of New York, Italy, everywhere, China. Just stay home. Listen to the Grappling Rewind. We got 130 episodes you can listen to on our backlog. Just don't listen to episode 1 through 10, and you should be good. So that's all I got for news. Let's get to the fun parts of the show that are not all coronavirus-y. Let's kick it off with, so basically what happened is this week we didn't have a lot to cover, or really anything to cover. So we put it to the team. What are the matches that you would want to talk about in retrospect? We made a giant list of hey, we may be here for a while. I still wanted to be doing match breakdown and talking about historic matches because we never get a chance to. So what matches does the team want to talk about? We made a big ass list and we pulled together 5 matches today that we're going to talk about that I talked about at the beginning of the show. And we're going to start it off in chronological order with Marcelo Garcia versus Terere in 2003. This is way before I started training. So this is a match that I had to catch in retrospect, and I've learned some of the context behind that match, having watched it years past. So Josh, where do you want to start with this match?
Well, let's talk about, this was a big deal because Terere had split from Alliance and formed TT.
I also
which was
realized that
Terere
I
and
have not been recording the screen until just now. So we are going to have one image that's static. So I apologize for all the viewing listeners, the watching listeners there. Keep going, Josh. This is
Sorry,
remote
dude.
remote show. It is what it is.
I didn't want to talk over you and cancel out all the recording. So it was a big deal. They had been training partners previously, so it was just a really interesting to see what was going to go on. And of course, you have Terere, who's very dynamic, who has great pressure passing. I'm counting on my fingers, and you can't see that, so it's really awkward to myself. It was just starting off like it's the beginning of the legend of Marcelo and kind of like the tail end of Terere's legend at the time.
This is right before he had all the kind of issues he went through with drugs and some other things. This is sort of really the tail end of his big like competitive career before he comes back and competes a little more. And this is really when Marcelo was, coming up.
And this was also before, this was when TNT was still a thing, before Braza became a thing and people had branched off from TNT or TT. And so it was a sort of a weird window where this was a really big deal for that because TT was still sort of this new idea. And, I think soon after, within a year after this match, they split off into Braza and I think Atos was some split of this and some other branching of things.
I think it was a couple of years only because I want to say that Terere came over to America for the first Worlds here. I might be a little off, and somebody can correct me.
That might be right.
But they were around for a little bit because Galval was coming up through that system.
Yep.
Technically, Galval gave Cobrinha's black belt only because Terere and Tellus weren't there at the time. And he was under that, but then Cobrinha went back over to Alliance. It's a big to-do, but a lot of people came out of that split, and big teams came out of that split.
Yeah, I mean, it was the premier team back then. It had, like, the biggest guys. There was, some other big teams there, but, like, the TT team in that era was the team. I think BJJ Heroes has, 2 or 3 articles about that split, about the TT team, about its formation, and about its breakup that are super interesting to read through. And I've read through them, I think, a couple of times over the years, and a lot of it gets lost to me just because I'm not, I am more junior in the sport than when all that was happening, so I'm getting it in retrospect and trying to remember a lot of it, and it's really cool to see all of those guys together. So this was a big match between two guys that were basically on the same team.
Roughly, yeah.
This was, to be honest, this is still retrospective for me too. I think I started in 2005, and so this was one of the hot matches that people were still talking about, but it's still not something I was around for. This is an old match.
Wait, how long have you been training, Zach?
2005 I started.
So oh wow, so you've been training longer than I have. Because I started
I did MMA. I fought MMA and did a lot of no-gi grappling matches for about 3 years before putting a gi on. So gi 12-ish, total 15-ish.
Y'all are old. So let's talk
Zach's like barely 30.
Oh my God, really?
31.
Man, time has not been kind to either of you guys. So let's talk about this match. Where do you want to start in this match?
I mean, if you think about it, you're trying to get to Marcelo being a guard player, like very butterfly and his X guard and things like that. And you do see little tidbits of that in the match. You see a lot of single leg X.
In the beginning of the match, particularly.
Yeah, well, that's because... Go on, Zach.
Sorry, that was something that I wanted to point out too, was that this was single leg X before single leg X had a name, right? Nobody called it the position single leg X. There was X guard and then this weird thing that happens sometimes at that point, at least in my training. I didn't hear the name single leg X until probably 2008, 2009. And then even then it was a weird position that people said was not very good. But Marcelo was playing it and actually I think hit a pretty standard sweep from the position here, or almost did.
Terere does a really good job of like pushing down that top leg and like identifying it, and he balances a long time in the single leg X guard, like almost not going into a full split, but having a very, very large and wide base as he slowly like addresses that topside leg and pushes it down below his knee line. That's initially sort of what he uses to get around Marcelo's guard here. He just kind of pressures and pressures and pressures, and then just kind of weathers the storm with the off balancing and gets around.
Well, what you see actually is like the beginnings of that, not knee cut, but leg weave type pass, because he gets into that position and starts just pressuring forward, and Marcelo has to dig, and get underneath to establish single leg X.
Oh.
And there's a reset at a certain point.
One quick thing for all the listeners and the viewers. All of the matches that we're going to talk about today are actually free on YouTube. So you can go and find these, and if you actually want to like follow along and look at what we're talking about as we're talking about it, you can find these matches for free and kind of click along. I forgot to say that at the intro of the show, but that's sort of why we've chosen a bunch of these matches, because they are available for you to watch in quarantine for free. So sorry, Josh, keep going.
No, it's fine. But again, like you see Marcelo digging, trying to get that leg up and through to cycle into single leg X, and Terere just pressures, and keeps it there. And the ref has no idea what's going on. You can see he is lost. He's wearing a IBJJF t-shirt and a pair of jeans. Huge change from what they do now. But, you know, it gets restarted into a weird position, and eventually, as the pressuring continues, he zips by the guard and lands in side control.
Yeah, that reset was actually huge for the match, too, because I think that something that was underappreciated at the time was that Marcelo did end up entering single leg X and had some nice control, and he got Terere's hip on the ground in a position that we would call about a half sweep at this point, but I don't think that the ref really acknowledged how close that sweep was when the reset happened, and then by the time he went back to the reset, he didn't actually position the heel in the single leg X position, and instead Marcelo's foot was around Terere's butt, which it was not prior to the reset, and that's when Terere was able to start making serious progression, because all of Marcelo's work to get into single leg X was sort of wasted by the reset, which happened a lot in the early days. I mean, still happens, but it happened a lot back in the day.
I feel like even the last couple of years since we're doing the show, we've seen better and better resets.
It all depends. Like the Terere forced that reset. If you watch it, like you can see how good of a competitor he is, because he's like, no, we're gonna go here. This is what we're gonna do. And eventually Marcelo's just like, I'm whatever, let's just go. And Terere got reset into the position that Terere wanted to be in. So I think that was part of it. And it also, like, that led to the pseudo 50-50 position they got into before the guard pass happened. And what's even funnier is if you're watching it as Terere is trying to get to a better position, the ref actually calls stalling on Terere from the top. And it was kind of wild.
Very weird.
That's why I kind of like going back and watching some of these matches, because it shows you the development of kind of the rules, what's considered stalling, where you go, and looking at these matches as kind of a historical perspective goes, oh yeah, the sport, although a lot of the grappling looks really similar, a lot of the ways it's called and a lot of where the emphasis is placed on where I'm going to fight guys is very different, because either the rules are different or the current meta game is very different. Like I always like to point to the Von Flue choke. You know, it was this weird shoulder choke you could do if someone held onto the guillotine, but you can see matches in like the early 90s, or sorry, late 90s even, when people would hold onto that guillotine and then there was no choke there because people weren't really aware of the choke very much. And so it's, again, you see shifts like this where you see stalling called from the top in this sort of position, something you probably wouldn't see today.
Fair point.
Yeah. But something that's interesting about Terere's passing in this is that I think Josh mentioned this a bit ago, but the way that he actually successfully passes is very textbook modern passing. And I think it didn't necessarily go out of style, but it's come into style a lot recently. And I think Buchecha has a new video out going over this style of passing, this sort of leg weave, heavy pressure, low on the hips kind of passing. And it was interesting to see Terere do it successfully in 2003 when I think it's gotten really popular in the past 2 years. was interesting historically seeing that.
He's actually, like, a lot of people point to him as being the guy that brought that style of passing to the forefront of jiu-jitsu, and it's like slowly leaked in and people moved away from it and then came back. But he's always credited as being that guy that brought that style of passing into jiu-jitsu.
I didn't realize that he was given the credit for it. I knew that he had passed like that, but I think going through, I didn't see it that much until recently. So maybe that's just my naivety.
Well, then, getting back into it, we've got side control. We've gotten the stalling call from the top against Terere, and there's a lot of pushing, and Terere climbs over into mount.
I thought the way he got mount was really interesting, too. He sort of times it off of, he's sort of going for the back of Marcelo, and he times it so Marcelo bumps. He's able to get his leg all the way over into the mount position, and he sort of rides Marcelo from this sort of half-turned position where the shoulders aren't completely flat on the mat initially. And the timing on it is just amazing to see because he's so controlled on the top end, he's able to get his leg over and avoid the leg entanglement and the half guard of Marcelo.
Yeah, and that, of course, leads to Marcelo just exploding out and exposing himself and getting caught in the infamous triangle from that match. That if you've been watching jiu-jitsu for a long time or if people have pointed it out, you see, oh, that's where he gets caught. And you can't, from my perspective anyway, when you watch the video, the triangle doesn't look super tight, but it has to be because within like maybe 8 seconds, Marcelo's tapping, and Terere is losing it and like diving on people. He's right next to like Salo, and he jumps on Comprito. And you see all these guys from that ended up being part of bigger teams or like putting a stamp in jiu-jitsu history, where you're like, wow, this is kind of wild that all this stuff is going on.
Yeah, I thought that the triangle was really interesting because you see he times it off of Marcelo bumping. Basically, Marcelo goes to bump him over, and Terere just takes his leg completely over from the mount, and then he actually falls to his back, like very, very quickly. He actually uses the momentum to fall to his back, and there's like a really big push that, from I've seen a lot of instructors in like focusing on guys finishing from the top in the triangle, and like especially at the higher levels, not falling to your back if you don't need to. And it's really cool to see a guy like against Marcelo Terere fall back immediately to his back in that position and electing to finish it from the back as opposed to trying to stay in the mounted position. I wasn't sure if that was because he felt stronger off the back, if it was how Marcelo bumped, or if it was actually that because of where they were positioned on the mat, he felt more comfortable that they wouldn't like reset him if he was in the triangle off the side there.
Well, I think that Marcelo had actually turned his back a little bit, and I don't know if Terere was actually maintaining the mount in that time. I think that at least the way that I watched it, was Marcelo had sort of bumped up from inside the mount, almost mount, and then turned his back, and as he was turning his back, Terere sort of rode it out, and instead of taking the hooks, then he switched down to the triangle. So I don't think he really had a mounted triangle secure in the first place, and I think that he ended up finishing on his back, not as a conscious choice to roll to his back, but because that's where he had the opportunity to actually cinch up the triangle.
It was just more available in that position than because it looked like he sort of sets it up from the mount, but he doesn't ever hold it in the mount. He immediately is on his back, looking for the finish there. So I thought it was really interesting, just kind of a not a shift in meta, but seeing a guy immediately not like attempt to keep the mounted triangle and elect to immediately go to the back. Go to his back to finish the triangle. I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but it was just an interesting piece. And then he loses his shit.
Dude, like that's... If anybody wants to see him really lose his shit, look up Terere versus Fabricio Verdum. The end of that match where he just like starts dancing and going, and he lost, but he's just going off. The whole crowd is on his side. Everybody's just hooting and hollering, and it's amazing. Like it gives me chills. I wasn't even there. Gives me chills just to see like this whole entire community come together. That's like if like Musumeci made it to the finals against Buchecha, and they had a really good match, and he gets caught, but then he gets up and he just starts like, hey, this is me, I'm celebrating, I'm doing all this. I guarantee the entire crowd would probably lose its shit as well.
Yeah, it's a really cool moment. That match. Actually, go back and watch that match. You got some time. You're in quarantine. What else you're gonna do? Watch that match too. That's a good match to talk about. There's a whole list of matches I want to talk about on the show because we're strapping in for, I'm guessing, a lot of quarantine shows. What's the next match?
More than likely.
Yeah. Well, so do you guys have anything else on that match?
No, watch it.
Nope.
It's free on YouTube. Watch that shit. It's very, very good and important from a historical perspective. So let's move on to 2004. We have Roger Gracie versus Jacare. I completely, for a second there, forgot Jacare's actual name. I was like, what the fuck is his name yet?
Ronaldo Souza.
Yeah, Jacare. So this is the infamous match that Roger Gracie breaks Jacare's shit. And Jacare doesn't. I'm going to recap the match real quick, and we'll go into some more kind of finer point details of the match. So basically what happens in this match is from the guard, Roger armbars Jacare, and then Jacare goes to pull out, and Roger goes, and breaks his arm. He goes belly down, breaks Jacare's arm. Jacare is able to rip his arm out and then run out of bounds. And then there's a very long reset period in which you realize that, oh yeah, Jacare's arm is totally broken. Like, not a little broken, not like, it hurt a little bit, like, it is broke. And Jacare spends the rest of the match sort of just running out of bounds and actively, like, preventing Roger from getting a hold of him and ends up winning the match. This is a really, really important match in Jiu-Jitsu for a bunch of reasons. Josh, what is your reason for this match being super important?
They started enforcing stalling more. A lot of people complain that him running away and not getting called for the last 2 minutes of the match is kind of wild that it didn't happen. So they're trying to, people were obviously like, why didn't he get DQ'd? And also, obviously his arm was broken. The man just like tucked it away.
Yeah,
and
It was just dangling.
Yeah, it was literally dangling for a portion of the match. Like, you see, he, like, mucks with it for a minute in the match, and, like, he, like, grabs his hand and, like, moves his hand around, and then you can see the arm is, like, he doesn't lift the arm at all. It's just hanging by his side. And then at one point towards the match, he just grabs his belt with that hand and holds the belt, and he's able to stall that shit out. So, for me, Zach, actually, sorry, let me ask Zach's points. Zach, what are your kind of takeaways from this match?
So the match itself is actually a really good match on top of the exciting part where he runs away for 2 minutes and the historical importance of it. The match itself is actually a really good match. But I also think that what came from this is that if there's an obvious break in someone's body, that the ref can call the match without having this happen again. I think that became a rule, which I think is not a rule that's used very often because not everyone's as crazy as Jacare, but I'm pretty sure that the way that the rules work in general now is that a ref can stop a match if there's an obvious breakage.
Yeah.
And then you win. You can now win a match by breaking someone's arm as well as getting them to tap before you break it.
Yeah, I think, I can't point to a specific, like, look at the rulebook now, look at the rulebook then, but I think after, it reminds me of, like, the early UFCs where shit would happen and then we'd go, maybe we should not allow that to be a rule. Maybe, like, Tank Abbott throwing a guy out of the ring. There's a really great video going around on YouTube, and it's 10 things that caused instant rule changes in MMA, and one of them is Tank Abbott throwing the guy out of the ring, and it's like, all right, well, nowhere in the rules does it say you can't do that. But you definitely can't do that. So Jiu-Jitsu kind of went, all right, if I break the guy's shit in half and he doesn't tap, I guess the ref can go, no mas, and you actually do win because you broke the guy's arm. So, again, I can't really think of, the only one I can think of recently is Hamalo with the foot.
What about Baby Cobrinha? When he got his shit broken.
But he got his shit broken, and it was that was versus Mateus Gabriel at Pans, I think.
Yeah.
And he got his shit broken. He didn't tap. He pulls away, and then he calls it. Like, he gets his shit broken, and then, like, verbally taps after. So it's like, that was...
Yeah, but that's still like weird where the ref was like, oh, that shit's fucked up. And Mateus Gabriel, I think, was like, hey, his shit's fucked up. And he was like, nah, I'm good. And then he was like, maybe not.
It's like, nah, I'm good, bro. Actually, in hindsight, this is, I am bodily injured right now in a pretty substantial way, and I'm about to fight Mateus Gabriel.
Well,
Maybe
you have
not.
to. We'll get off of that side story of injuries in general, but you have to think like Jacare and Roger had like a 5-match series that started at brown belt, and they knew each other's game very well. And Jacare is known for being super explosive, for having great stand up and just being all over the place. Whereas Roger is a master technician, just like a monster, as we discussed last week, where he mounted and cross choked everybody at Worlds the one year, and then almost did it again the next year, and that only got ruined by one guy letting him choke him from the back. So you have these two guys, and again you had Roger set himself up and then break this dude's arm, and just because the referee was like, nah, we can let it go, he ran away and got the victory with it. And then you had like the rubber matches and everything. I think they met at Europeans, and that match was super boring because they were both kind of tentative. And then at ADCC, where Jacare got choked out from the back, and then I think one last time Jacare won the last one, but ended up the series was like 3-2 off of like a questionable like takedown call. So, I mean, would I love to see them compete again, even 10, 12 years removed from even the last match? Absolutely. But just going back and watching that match and watching how tough both guys are and were, and also how the rules are interpreted by each ref even today. It's a great case study for all of that.
Yeah, it seems like we have. I know. Again, one of the reasons I love looking back on these is because I'm a big rules aficionado. Like, I like how the rules of any sport dictate how that sport is played and how the meta of that sport like changes. I'm a huge fan of like any sport I get into at all. I will read through like every rule book on that sport just to understand like how you can game stuff, why guys do certain things, and looking at this match and the stalling call and how this forever changed stalling, because this was such a high profile match with two huge guys. It had a result that everyone saw, and you have a match that's now viewed and looked at over and over and over and over, and everyone passes their judgment on, okay, well, what was the correct call here for either the arm or the match or for the stalling? Because it's looked at with such stringency, because it's such a big deal match, those are the matches that you get big rule changes out of, or changes in the meta, or even not even written changes in the rules, but the way that certain things are interpreted by certain refs now changes based on the pressure and the heat that the community put on for a certain match one way or the other. So that's really why I love this match so much, because it's such a teachable moment of, hey, this is how things were, and this is how things have changed as a result of this match in particular. You can see the moment in history where stuff changes. And that's a really cool moment. Zach, you had some more, I think, on this match, actually. Did you want to touch on any more of it?
So, just a little bit. I think, so Roger Gracie is sort of known for his high guard play. He's a super technical guy in the first place, but at this time especially, he was doing a lot of high guard work, and I think he did even throughout the rest of his career. But so the arm break itself is very technical and worth watching, because I think high guard has gone out of style a little bit. I think there's some older guys that still do it, but it's not seen at high levels very much anymore. But Roger Gracie's just so good at it, and when he actually breaks the arm, he does it in a really nice way where he sort of extends Jacare a little bit, and then he moves up into the high guard into a place where I think where people fail in high guard is that they're not getting the shoulder under control well enough, and just the way that he's able to set up high guard for the actual break exchange is so nice, and worth just taking a look at for historical sake, if not to sort of work that into personal games a little bit.
Learn from the old matches to do you jiu-jitsu better now. I think that's the takeaway. You guys either got any more pieces and parts on this match?
Take your time, again, like Zach just said, and what Maine just turned it into for stupid people. Watch the basics, because your crazy techniques only get better when your basics are further and further polished.
Yeah, and Roger, I think, is the best guy. If you're going to look at, like, basic techniques, that dude does, like, very little flashy stuff. He's going to hit you with A, B, C, D, and then he chokes you from the front or from the back. And that's what he's going to do. I think, Josh, like 1 or 2 episodes ago, you talked about basically what his entire game plan series was for every match he does. He's like, he does this, then he does this, then he does this, or you do this, and he does this, 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 and this. It was really, he's a really interesting guy to watch because he's so consistent in the way that he executes.
That was last episode, by the way.
Last episode, then. Grappling Rewind episode 123. So let's move on to Buchecha versus Rodolfo Vieira, the 2013. Was this the absolute finals or was this the weight finals? Putting you guys on the spot.
It was the absolutes, because if I'm not mistaken, Rodolfo was still... No, that might have been 2012, because 2012 they met and Rodolfo won, and then spoiler, 2013 Buchecha won. I think that was the start to his like epic what's going on right now.
The Buchecha era, where
Yes.
he'd be beating everyone and then occasionally giving away an absolute title to Leandro. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Even the 2012 fight between these two was really close. Like, Buchecha lost, but it was a damn good match.
And what's funny about this match is, like, you'll see it on, again, YouTube. It'll say the greatest jiu-jitsu match ever. And I don't agree with that. Not because it was a bad match, but because Buchecha just essentially clowned Rodolfo. Like, he ran him over.
I actually think that the YouTube video that says best match ever is the 2012 one.
Oh,
yeah, because I watched the 2013.
Which makes more sense because that's back and forth. This one's far more Buchecha dominating.
Go back and watch them both. Again, you're in quarantine. You got some time. Do whatever you want to do, but might as well watch some jiu-jitsu matches.
It's actually funny. These two matches start almost exactly the same, where Buchecha ends up on the bottom after pulling guard and starts attacking a knee bar and then rolls through the knee bar, controlling the outside leg, and then is able to sit up through the sweep. And so both matches within the first minute, Buchecha is attacking a knee bar and doing it in a way where maybe he was actually attacking the knee bar, but it looked a lot more like he was just forcing Rodolfo to respect the knee bar in a way that gives him the sweep. And within the first minute of both matches, very similar technique. I thought that was interesting.
That was a really cool sweeping technique that he used. And the way he sets it up, it looks like one of those moves where he will opportunistically take the knee bar if it's there, but he's not going to overcommit for it and like look for the knee bar and try to sell it on the knee bar, manage to get past and get his back taken. He's going to get there, and then if the knee bar is not there, he's going to opt for that sweep, for that far side leg pant grip for the sweep. And as Rodolfo sort of goes to get away from it, he off balances and then is able to come up with it. And what I have in my notes that I thought was really interesting here was you don't see this kind of work from a lot of big guys. Like, this entire match, you could see it like middleweight or medium heavy or like even in lightweight. Is Buchecha moves in this match like few dudes in the open class move and at the heavier weights move. Like in this transition at the beginning kind of sets the tone for Buchecha is going to run and push a pace here that is pretty unlike we see most guys at his weight class push. And I think even in 2013, I think that match is 2013, that was less common then.
Absolutely. And that was like between 2012 and 2013 was the big change for big guys. Like Zach's actual weight class and my adopted weight class, because I'm a lazy fat person. You see these guys that are all like 6 foot plus, but they're shredded. And they're just putting on a pace that you didn't see the heavyweight and above do before that. You saw your Big Macs and your people like that and your Gabriel Velas who would just like push against each other and try to end up on top because the guy on top was going to win. Their guard work wasn't amazing, anything like that. And then you have these guys that are these just giant athletes that are flying all over the place like middleweights and going to town on each other and putting a pace that the former heavyweight, super heavyweight, and ultra heavyweights could never have kept up with.
And you don't see it in this match, unfortunately, I think. But Buchecha had already at this point started doing a lot of what is won him a lot of his world championships, and that's that sort of guard game where he stands in base, and then moves to very technical wrestling, but he's got these advantaged positions because he's standed up from underneath in the guard and is able to attack singles and doubles in ways that are really, really easy to finish. Well, maybe not on some of these guys, but are easier to finish because of the advantage that he's gotten. And you see pieces of that in this match, but he doesn't actually ever get to standing up and doing it. But it's already developing at this point, and that was a big change in these weight classes, was this sort of, it doesn't matter as much if I'm on the bottom because I'm going to be able to stand in base and wrestle you back down. And this dynamic Buchecha style is starting to become apparent in this match.
And going back, because we're talking more of technique rather than play-by-play, the way he moves and the way he just gains position and hops on, just going underneath. Going back to it, you don't see big guys doing that much, where he was diving underneath and attacking the back and like somewhat giving up position, but always having control and then coming up in the better position afterwards.
The secret you're talking about is really cool because you see Buchecha, like, I forget, it's basically, it's not like the Berimbolo, but it's a variation of that, like, leg pinning position where you roll behind the guy and you take the back off. And Buchecha's actually able to get the back of Rodolfo here. And Rodolfo does something that's really interesting after. Like, the positioning to get the back was crazy. And you hear the crowd just losing its shit during the match, which I always find really cool. And then you see Rodolfo do something that we've talked shit about on the show before. Rodolfo stands up with Buchecha on his back. And I thought that was... What was that, Josh?
He hula hoops him around to guard.
Right, but I thought it was really interesting because we've talked a lot of shit about guys standing up out of the back mount because especially in Nogi, we see in the current meta that body triangle is so present that once you stand up, the guys throw the body triangle in and there's nothing. But because I think back in 2013, the body triangle was, it was definitely there, but we saw guys go to it a lot less. Like going to the body triangle, especially in the gi, was less common. Especially for the bigger guys. And so we see Buchecha opt for the hooks, and Rodolfo can start fighting the hooks when he's bent over in the standing position, and Buchecha is forced to, he starts to slide down a little bit, and then Rodolfo can get his arm and shoulder over Buchecha's body in order to cause Buchecha to spin around into the front of guard. And I just thought it was a really interesting sequence because currently you're going to see the body triangle get thrown in there for a lot of guys, and typically, standing up, it's really rare to see guys stand up now, especially in the gi, because people will throw the bow and arrow chokes in from those positions now. Like, we see that we just don't see that very often anymore.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think it worked that well in 2013 either. I think that in this particular niche scenario, it worked out well because Buchecha was a little bit low on the back and he didn't have the choking grip set up. And when he entered into the back position, he had this beautiful seatbelt and he controlled the far outside hip and then got his second hook in. And then after motion happened a little bit more, he moved from that initial position to a place where I think Rodolfo was able to stand up intelligently. I think it was less the time and more the specific position that they were in, because I think that we in 2013 we were still saying don't stand up when someone has your back.
That's reasonable. I thought it was really cool. The next sequence, as soon as Buchecha decides to go from the standing guard, when he slides down, Rodolfo Vieira immediately uses that to start passing. Like, he doesn't even let Buchecha sort of get a De La Riva hook in or anything like that. He immediately turns to the side And I just thought it was really cool to see, again, even like deeper into the match, Rodolfo still had that level of explosiveness and like proprioception and awareness to get around as soon as Buchecha sort of lightens the pressure up on the guard and slides down.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is super awkward to play.
Awkward pause.
To play off of on Skype because no one's like sitting in front of him, like looking at a screen, trying to talk to Josh and Zach.
So yeah, grappling rewind troubles as I fidget around more as well because I can't sit still, and I'm also trying to charge my laptop.
Fun. Yeah, this is like we're going back. We're taking a big ass step back of the professionalism of the show with when it comes to remote recordings. Yeah, and then Buchecha kind of continues, jumps over the mount, and then sort of finishes going for the armbar. But at that point, it was pretty. You could see definitively that Buchecha had the momentum in the match and was going to take a points victory over. I just thought it was a really great match. I think the speed and watching like the way in which Buchecha executes, and also how crazy some of the sequences were for the weight class that these guys are in. It was a really impressive match. It was a lot of fun. Those are sort of the takeaways that I have. What do you guys have? Any additional takeaways?
Nah.
That's exactly it.
It was a fun match. Go back and watch it. It's free. I think the IBJJF has a bunch of the matches that we're talking about up on their page. I think there's also some, because some of these matches are so famous, there's also some other camera footage for them as well. So I always enjoy watching like alternate camera angles of matches. So there's that as well.
This is also when IBJJF was. It's when they transitioned over from letting Budo Videos do it because they wanted to do it, and they had IBJJF TV running it before Flow took over. So, sometimes you got to find matches that are in 240p, and sometimes you can find them that are high definition.
This one's pretty good. This one, that definition is pretty good for this one.
Nope, I'm thinking of something else. Never mind.
Okay.
I was thinking of a different match completely. This was good definition. The next match is what I'm thinking about.
So, next match, we have Cobrinha versus Rafa Mendes. Ruben Charles versus Rafa Mendes. 2014. Actually, in hindsight, I don't have where this was. World's Finals 2014. Take it away, guys.
Let's see. What happened in this? Whole lot of 50-50.
Yeah.
A worm guard was brought up and used.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that they actually this is back in 2014. Even on commentary staff is crediting Keenan with like guys going to the lapel guards, and it kind of makes me laugh because I remember when I got into jiu-jitsu, like the worm guard was this mystical. Actually, it was a little after I got into jiu-jitsu. Like the worm guard was this mystical thing, and it was like, oh, there's this guy out there that's using all these lapels and wrapping guys up, and it's like, is it legal? Is it gonna stay legal? Are they gonna ban it? And then it's like. It's almost 10 years later and they haven't done anything about it, haven't banned it. It's kind of starting to take over a lot of the meta. And Zach talked about it on our Europeans recap show that at the purple belt level, there was not a single finals match at Euros that did not have some sort of lapel guard being used. And it's cool to see Keenan like kind of getting credited for Rafa using it here back in 2014.
Well, I mean, technically they did train together. That's when Keenan had gone over to the West Coast and Atos/AOJ were, doing those big worlds camps and things like that and spreading the knowledge and whatnot. So, I mean, if Rafa thought it was a good idea to use it at the time, which it slowed Cobrinha down, and it worked into his Berimbolo very well, so why not use it?
Yeah, I thought so. This match in particular was towards the end of the Cobrinha-Rafa rivalry, which had, I think when we were talking about this, we were actually just trying to get a Rafa and Cobrinha match in here because the rivalry was so important for jiu-jitsu and such a long-standing and interesting series of fights.
It has a Wikipedia article about it. Like it's a jiu-jitsu rivalry with a Wikipedia article about it. Like that tells you how rivalrous it was. Okay, keep going, Zach.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we picked this match to talk about, and mostly because it's part of this rivalry, and it was probably the best quality free video that you can find from this rivalry on YouTube. And so what you end up with is a lot of what the rest of their matches looked like, which is just a lot of 50-50. I think that this one was a little bit more exciting than some of the others that ended up in 50-50. I think some of the early Rafa Cobrinha matches are a little bit more exciting maybe because the trend towards 50-50 at these lighter weights was not as strong yet. But there's still some exciting moments here that you don't get in other 50-50 stalemate matches.
I was kind of impressed with how high scoring the match ended up being. I mean, Rafa takes this match 10-8. Keep going, Zach.
It's that back and forth though. It was the knock the guy over, stand up, establish position, get points. Get knocked over, the other guy establishes, get points. I think my main takeaway from it was the referees not letting certain positions play out, because it would have been higher scoring had the referee not stopped the match while Rafa was going into mount, and thusly restarting it on the feet because you can't recreate that position properly.
Yeah, I thought that was...
that was a huge restart. I think Rafa ended up winning. I think he deserved to win the match overall, because even if they had not stopped it at that point, then it's still the same winner. But had Rafa lost this match, that would have been a dramatic and terrible reset, because Rafa was probably going to progress well, and we needed to see how that played out. And then they started him standing, which was very odd, I thought.
Again, talking about famous resets. This is, again, had the victor been, but it bears discussion. Had the victor been different, had Cobrinha been able to take this match, that reset would have been a huge point of discussion. And so a lot of times we forget about the matches where the guy that was winning gets a bad reset and wins, but you have to remember that it does go both ways on resets, and a lot of that does factor into how future resets are done.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you have people, and there's the good and bad sides of the rules. Like, you can't talk to the ref, or you get in trouble, you get penalized for it. But there are certain points where it's like, I would fight for that position back, or I would fight to be like, don't stop it right now, because I'm about to get this position and you're not going to let me recreate this position, because he was there and locked up around the legs. All he had to do was inch up. So the ref could have just let it roll, let him gain position or get knocked out of position, and then stopped it.
This is one thing that I appreciate ADCC for the most, is that you go till
We'll let you fight on tables.
You go till you die. And it's like, we'll go as long as it needs to go if you roll into the bleachers. Like, I do appreciate Seth and Mo implementing the safety border coming up, because in Los Angeles this last year, the concrete was really, really fucking hard. And a lot of guys landed on that hard-ass concrete. And I'm like, man, if we're going to let it fight out, like, maybe have something that's not hard-ass concrete directly after the match. But again, you don't get a lot of bad resets in ADCC because they let you go. So again, we talk about resets a lot, and a trend here is that almost all of these big, giant matches have a reset in them that potentially changes the match for better or for worse.
Except for, Buchecha and Rodolfo. There was no reset.
Well, yeah, okay. There was no reset for that match.
Up.
All right, Josh, taking my points that I had carefully crafted out and dismantling them like a meal with knowledge and logic.
No, I was going to let you roll with it. Like, you're right for the most part. Like, here's this one little thing that I can say that ruins your entire thing. But honestly, a lot of times when you have those resets, those can be those crucial moments in these big matches.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I thought was interesting was there's actual overlay of the scoreboard. And we actually get full names on the broadcast for the match that I watched. I was super happy about that. I will die on this point, Josh. You gave me the rolling eye look. Like, I will die. I want to see competitors' full names on the bottom of the screen. I don't give a shit if you have 8 Portuguese names. Like, I want to see every single one of them written out and spelled so I can know who's fighting on the bottom of the screen.
Well, that's more like a flow thing. The flow thing is what screws you up, because, again, this was all pre-flow.
This is IBJJF TV. And they also have a
Right.
really shitty what ACBJJ used to do. They have a video camera and they have picture-in-picture of the scoreboard video camera on the screen off center for this match.
This was 6 years ago. Okay, that was the best technology they had.
And honestly, like it looks kind of shitty, but I'm a huge fan of actually doing that because it has the full athlete names and it has what you're actually seeing on the mat that the competitors are seeing and the coaches are seeing. So it shows you the information that the team and the competitor sees, and there's no like transcription error, or there's no, oh, maybe it was this points, maybe it's this points. No, this is the official scoreboard. This is what it says, and it's being broadcast. Like I actually really do appreciate that, and I wish we'd see more picture-in-picture with second camera on the scoreboard. We did it 6 years ago. We can do it again. We have the technology. It was not lost to us in the great coronavirus of 2020. Like we can still do it.
It's not over. You don't know that yet.
It's not over yet. We're still doing a remote
We're gonna
show.
go back to like stone tablets, and you're gonna have to chisel out little slash marks for each point. It's gonna ruin it if they have to roll back the points.
Yeah. So anything else on this match?
No, it's a good match to go and watch if you want to get a perspective on what the rivalry looked at for the years that it was going.
All right, so let's talk about. We try not to just pick dudes matches and throw some really great ladies matches in. The match we're gonna talk about is Mackenzie Dern versus Michelle Nicolini in 2015. This is the World Finals for the 2015 for the weight class. At this point in time, Michelle Nicolini had been, I think the technical term is stomping through. I had accumulated like 8 world titles. Mackenzie Dern was coming off the previous year at brown belt. I think this is her black belt debut. Is that correct, Josh?
I think she did Euros or Pans or something.
Sorry, her world's debut at black belt.
World's debut.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry.
I believe so, but I'm not going to guarantee that. I'm not as good as remembering when people got promoted to black belt as it is just overall jiu-jitsu knowledge.
So you heard it here first. Josh says that she got promoted in 2015 prior to Worlds, and this was her first one. So, what do you want to talk about for the match? This is, again, a big changing of the guard moment. Mackenzie Dern is able to win this one by submission, actually. And again, this match is free on YouTube, and you should watch it because it's very good. Where do you want to start?
Well, that's the thing. Like, this is where not Michelle was like declining, but when she was kind of on her way out of jiu-jitsu and going more towards MMA. And not saying like Michelle isn't still an amazing jiu-jitsu player. It was just the younger generation coming up and being just like a beat ahead of her. And that's what happened with Mackenzie, who like even then, like you had a few flashes of Mackenzie, and then she started running into oh Christ, I'm gonna forget her name, from Gracie Humaita, Bia Mosquita.
Yeah.
And Mosquita just had her number and would beat the ever-loving Jesus out of her. But, you know, this was just that changing point where you had the next generation coming through. And that's not saying much because then you also had Michelle coming back and completely destroying Tammy Musumeci's arm. What was it, like a year or two later?
That's a good fight on its own.
Yeah, go back and watch that. That's on YouTube too, I believe.
What's exciting about this fight, or the reason that I really liked this fight to talk about it, there's so much attacking that I can't really pick out specific points that I like to talk about technically, because Dern is on the attack so much this whole entire fight. It felt like even when Nicolini was in a dominant position, she was just seconds away from being attacked. That Dern was just on the offensive the entire match, and it's really impressive to see the sort of vigor that she comes at the match with. And I think that's why the match is worth watching overall. It's just that it's an exciting match, and it's important to see that if you are attacking all the time, you can set the pace even from positions that are non-dominant positions. She was I think, in charge of the match.
That was the really kind of striking thing to me watching this match again, was just how frequently, even the commentary staff talks about it, is like Dern is going for the knee bar and the toe hold like at multiple points of the match over and over and over and over. And it's a very even match at the beginning, and then you see Mackenzie just continue to throw up submissions, and eventually starts to sort of apparently like sort of wilt Michele a little bit here and take control of the momentum of the match as they go further into the match. And at the end, she gets the back, she gets even that really nice, high controlled back mount with the lapel over, and is able to finish a really like high bow and arrow choke. And she gets there basically by just forcing Nicolini to defend. And Nicolini's definitely getting up and scoring points, and there's some good back and forth points of the match where both women score. But the pace and the amount of subs that Mackenzie Dern throws up in this match is it's uncommon at a world finals match, and especially versus like the long-standing, reigning, dominant champion. It's really impressive to see, kind of in some more context of why the match is impressive, to see the young up-and-comer win a match like that.
You actually see this nowadays, like in the past 2 years with Marigali, where he is just relentlessly attacking and going for the best position and just whittling down his opponents and eventually finishing them. So, like, it goes to show that as long as you can keep up the pace, if you consistently attack, like, you can be successful and not always nail down, like, a solid position.
Another guy we're seeing do this a lot is Roberto Mendes. We've talked about him a bunch recently on the show. That's sort of his MO, is just he's going to keep coming at you until eventually like he's going to either make you make a mistake or like he's just going to end up scoring on you just because he's relentless. So I think it's really interesting to see, even like 5 years ago at this match, that sort of same dynamic play out where the younger generation comes in, guns blazing, not a whole lot to lose, great technician, but just willing to throw a pace and throw just a tantamount amount of submission offense out at the older generation. And we see it work out well, more times than I would expect.
It's just really difficult to keep up that pace. That's an effective style of jiu-jitsu, but it's also really exhausting.
Yeah.
And so, I think the impressive thing is that people are able to do it at that level, and you might see it in younger guys a little bit more just because, your body's capable of doing it. You don't have the compounded injuries and wear and tear that comes with 2 decades of jiu-jitsu. And so you can keep up that pace a little bit easier. Your recovery's faster, and it's a style that you can play for these younger guys coming in. And so I think that might be why you see it in that specific scenario so much. It's just that, just got promoted to black belt, unbelievable competitor. You're able to keep up this pace against that guy that's been there for 10 years. And that guy, maybe, depending on who they are and how much acai they eat, maybe they can keep up that pace.
I think we're also seeing that with the Rotolos, and I'm kind of thinking about it as an age thing. That is a style that typically we see in younger grapplers. There's very few guys that are that have been black belts for more than 5 years that we see continuously maintain that style and like level of pace. I think like guys like Gary Tonin are some of the few guys that we can see. But again, he's a super outlier in the pace that he pushes in general. There's very few like long-standing established black belts that we see that just fire a pace like that down your throat for that length of time in matches. And so, yeah, I think it's talking about it as an age thing is a really interesting kind of point to bring up, is like, is this something we just see in, or typically just see in younger fighters because they're able to get in that good a shape to do it?
Well, I mean, also that, not to like stomp all over those points because I agree with them, but I will say that when I was way less fat, I started doing that too. And I'm not saying that I'm a high level competitor in the least bit, but when all I was doing was like doing jiu-jitsu and cardio, I could just keep up this breakneck pace that would just befuddle people, more so probably because I used to just go really slow and be a fat, lazy piece of crap. But when you can just keep going and you're not really tired, whether it's in a 6-minute round or it's a 10-minute round, that really throws people off.
Yeah, we see it a lot. We see that not infrequently with a guy that's just. We see it in matches where guys have nothing to lose. Where, okay, this guy is coming up. He is, he's got nothing to lose against the long-standing champion or the person that he's expected to lose to, and they throw the kitchen sink at that competitor. And more so than I would expect, a lot of times they are able to get a victory just on sort of tenacity of like, okay, cool, there's 2 minutes left. He's thrown up 4 subs every minute for the previous 8 minutes, and he's just going to keep throwing up subs and forcing you to defend. And eventually, like, all it has to do is one of those subs or one of those passing sequences have to work on someone who's a little tired or doesn't quite make the turtle as quickly or doesn't quite defend as well. And that's, again, sort of what we see here is Mackenzie's throwing up repeated subs over and over and over and over. He's able to eventually just to get to the back and continue to throwing up the subs on the back and gets the bow and arrow choke and gets the win.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, super impressive match, fun match. So all these matches, you guys have anything else to add on this match?
Nope.
Watch it. Super exciting all the way through.
So, yeah. So that's about all I have. That's about what we have for this show. Go back and watch all these matches. Marcelo versus Terere 2003. Roger versus Jacare 2004. Buchecha versus Rodolfo 2013. Cobrinha versus Rafa in 2014. And Mackenzie Dern versus Michel Nicolini in 2015. They are all free. They are all on YouTube. They are all matches that are definitely worth your time if you're a fan of like professional jiu-jitsu. And especially kind of a historical perspective on why we cover and how we cover the matches that we do. They're great. They're free. Any sort of closing thoughts on any of those, you guys?
Not really. Go back, learn from the past because you'll see those things. It becomes cyclical. Things will pop back up in the future. While new things are added, you will see the old things pop back up.
And also, I think something to keep in mind is if you're really concerned with the meta at a high level and you go back and watch these things, sometimes there are very well thought out and well practiced and well refined techniques that were used 5-10 years ago that are now effective in the current meta that no one has come across yet. One of the things that I've been talking about lately and heard a couple other people mentioning is that some of the sort of Bernardo Faria pressure passing things might be coming back into style because a lot of the standing passing game, the guards have caught up to the standing passes now, and so maybe it's a little safer to be on your knees and pass in the way that Bernardo was doing 5-6 years ago. And so it's worth going back and watching these things to see what are people doing there and how does that fit into the meta now, because maybe you don't have to put all the work into figuring out how to attack the meta. Maybe somebody else did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really cool takeaway. I like that. You guys get anything else before moving to the segment with David?
Nope.
All right, guys. Appreciate it a lot. Thank you. How you doing? We are here with David Aguzzi from Grappling Industries, the owner and CEO of Grappling Industries, here to talk with us about kind of how the coronavirus has affected a lot of the events that you guys run, and then a couple other things that I want to talk to you about, such as the Arnold Classic and some other super fights and events that you guys have run. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself, sir?
Doing pretty good. It's been a little interesting for us recently with the coronavirus because there's been kind of a stop on professional events. So we are looking to make some other content. You asked and you talked to us, and I was really happy to speak to you. I think our audience will really enjoy the conversation we're going to have. So I wanted to start off with how has the coronavirus and sort of all of this affected Grappling Industries? I know you guys have had to cancel a number of events, but how has it affected the promotion in general?
First, I want to start off by saying that Grappling Industries is still very healthy. We do have the plan that we're going to continue growth expansion once we get out of the coronavirus stages. We can't say clearly for sure when that's going to be, but we still have to use this time to figure out how we're going to continue to grow or innovate once we're allowed to put on shows. In the meanwhile, it has kind of plagued our events. Like every other tournament brand or event industry brand across the world, everything is being canceled. As of right now, I think we've canceled 25 events over the last week alone. with about, I would say, another 10 cancellations to come in the upcoming week. As of right now, we've been pushing everything back that we have in April and May and pushing it further and further back into the year. Right now, we're trying to push everything back into the middle of July to end of July or into August. Even then, it's hard to say by the reports on the economy and on the news when this will all end. We've spent maybe our entire cash flow in refunding the competitors as well. There was some dispute maybe earlier on about what would we do, would we coupon competitors or refund competitors. I can tell you straight up that we've refunded over the last week alone $200,000 in cash flow. So that's the type of money that we've collected in registrations for future events that's now not in our hands. We've returned it. Since those events no longer exist, it's kind of hard to say that we can hold on to it or postpone certain dates. If an event only has 10 competitors registered for it and it was in 2 months from now, and we were expecting the big spike of registrations to come in for that event, it's hard to say that a 10 competitor event currently signed up for can be postponed and that money can be held on to. So those smaller events might only have $1,000 of cash flow, but when you consider those plus the big events that had 200-300 competitors signed up for them that needed to be refunded as well, it created quite the mess. I know there's some tournaments out there that they only plan one event at a time, or they plan 5 events at a time, and this can be really hard for them as well. But when you're canceling like 25 to 40 events, it's literally your whole upcoming event calendar, which not only is the cash flow that you're refunding, but it's all the work you put into those events clearly is down the drain too. Like all those advertisements had to be disabled. Everybody had to be negotiated with. But I mean, to be able to come out of this and still be healthy, still be able to have all our employees in place and have no one quit and no one's going to be fired, I think there's a lot of positivity there for us. I think our team is now focusing on once the coronavirus, like the whole conversation of the coronavirus ends finally, what will we be doing from that point? Because I can't tell you that once the whole coronavirus ends, that we're ready to put on an event the week after. It doesn't work like that. I think we're smart enough to know at Grappling Industries that it'll take at least 4 to 6 weeks for us to hit a show after the whole coronavirus talk ends, because people are going to want to make sure it's over with. At first, there's going to be a lot of people who have turned into germaphobes who want a few more weeks maybe of letting things settle down. The economy is extremely bad right now. I mean, anyone who watches the news or has any stock knows that. So it might take the 4 to 6 weeks for people to decide, okay, I have enough money to eat and for rent, I can start spending it in entertainment. Previous reports of past recessions and past crises like 2008 or previous to that, you see that people do spend a lot of money on entertainment, but it's hard to determine right now if they're going to spend the same amount of money on entertainment. The younger audiences might, because they have a lot more disposable income, but you might see parents who have been paying for their kids' registrations for the past couple of years not want to jump on a registration fee for their kid to enter a jiu-jitsu tournament right away. So right now we're pushing everything back. We're refunding everything. We're trying to stabilize everything, like stop the bleeding. I think every company in the world right now is trying to stop the bleeding. And from there, we're trying to evaluate how long after coronavirus will it take us to finally just go back to 3 to 6 events a weekend.
Is there anything that anyone can do sort of in the meantime to sort of continue supporting grappling? We talked about on the show how people, we like them if they can to not cancel their gym memberships, to sort of continue to support as they do. Is there any way that people can continue to support Grappling Industries while all of this is going on?
We've been putting out the message and the posts lately and the advertising that we're trying to sell lifetime passes. I think every company right now needs to find a way to keep cash flow going, keep their sales going. If you just stop doing business altogether right now, then you're setting yourself up for a bigger failure later. Like I said, it might take 4 to 5 weeks after this for a lot of companies to ramp back up. all those laid off employees across the world right now, they're not going to get to come back to their jobs on the first day. Those companies need to vamp up their sales again to afford that payroll expenditure. We've been asking to sell lifetime passes. It's the only product we have right now. We can't sell registrations. No one's signing up for tournaments. That's the fact of it. We have tournaments open clearly in late July, August, September, but right now it's still very uncertain that people want to sign up for that. So right now we're only selling lifetime passes. They typically sell for 700 American. We've received some offers for like 500 that we have accepted, but typically we're still selling them around 700. We've been able to sell about 50 to 60 of those in just the last 3 days. So that's keeping our cash flow going. That's keeping us able to afford stuff like payroll or leases or, tax bills are going to come up pretty soon. Even if you've delayed them 3 months, if I don't work for those 3 months, I still have the same tax bill in 3 months. Right. So it's good to just evaluate what liabilities you have coming up and be able to afford those. So that's why we've been trying to really sell lifetime passes. Those 50 people are going to have a great time when Grappling Industries does come back, in our opinion. But besides that, we're not asking for more help than that. We don't want free help. That's why selling a lifetime pass is selling a good of ours. It's a product of ours that we sold in the past as well. So if people do buy those, then they're getting something from us, and we're getting a sale back. So we're just trying to conduct business still, but with our secondary and not our primary products, basically.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of like the tournaments that you all run. It's when I talk to my students about competing, you guys are the one that I always ask them and recommend they go do. I think that people get the most bang for their buck for registration. I really enjoy your rule set and your round robin format. Like I'm a really big fan of what you guys are doing and how you run your tournaments. I've had a great time competing in your tournaments, and so the lifetime passes are great. If people aren't familiar with lifetime passes, it is a single fee that you pay for a basically lifetime registration to, is it any Grappling Industries event that you want to go compete at?
Yeah, it's any Grappling Industries event. So, for example, if you live in Ohio, you can compete in New York or in Vegas or California or France or England or Ireland or Poland, Australia, wherever you want. Basically, you pay the fee. We're going to attach your Smooth Comp account that you register off of. That's on our platform, and we're going to attach it to a code, and you use that code for the rest of your life. It's good for gi, no gi, the absolutes. It's good for your kids for their entire life. So we have a lot of parents who bought it for their kids. So the 8-year-old kid can compete until they're 40 if they want to for free at this Grappling Industries event. And I mean, at $700 and the registration fees being $80 to $105, it only takes you about 7 to 10 events, depending on early bird to late bird registration. That might be considered to some people an investment, but I mean, after a year to 2 years for the average competitor, it actually starts to pay off quite a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan. I mean, again, I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing. Your events are a lot of fun. I like the format of the events, and I think it's honestly a really reasonable price for what you're getting for like even a standard registration alone. The lifetime pass is, especially if you're planning on competing at any frequency whatsoever. You know, you guys are in our area, I think 2 or 3 times a year. It's a really good investment in yourself for competing, and it's a cool thing that you guys are offering right now. I think when you first offered it, was it in 2017 or 16? I forget what year you guys first offered. I saw you had 10 of them available when you first offered it.
Yeah, so at first, it seems like the lifetime pass is really like the crisis maneuver of our team, because in 2017, late 2017, when we had just expanded to a second truck in the States, expanding to the West Coast, we had one of our 2 trailers stolen with the entire production in it. And that's pretty hard, because at that point we were like starting up into expansions. It wasn't like right now where we were in 3 continents and 20 countries. We had a lot of legal fees back then. We had a lot of like the setup fees, and at the same time as the trailer being stolen, the West Coast shows were not really producing the numbers that they were today. Like, those shows were actually losing money. A good story about all that was that leading into that West Coast expansion, Grappling Industries had only lost money on 1 show out of 200 shows produced. And then going into the West Coast expansion, we lost money on the first 10 out of 12 shows that we produced.
I think it was either you or Marco gave a really cool interview. I think it was with Grappling Central a couple of years ago. And I have recommend anyone that has not heard the interview go and listen to it. It talks about how you guys expanded and the Dallas moment and basically a good portion of the history for the early Grappling Industries days. And I'm just a big fan of the interview. It's always cool when you hear tournament promoters talk about, you know, the trials and tribulations that come with producing these events and putting on, you know, events for the good of the jiu-jitsu community. I mean, the tournaments are tough to run, so it's cool to hear these stories.
I think the one that included the Dallas story that you're talking about would be Marcos. I've been on the Grappling Central podcast twice in the past, but I haven't mentioned the Dallas story.
Okay,
I think
Marcos,
that was it was definitely Marcos. Marcos loves the Dallas story. We were basically just in a hotel lounge at a Hyatt in Dallas after the first event, and we were drinking. And like when I drink, I start coming up with crazy ideas, and I'm like, man, we need a second truck, and then later on it would be eventually we need a third truck, and then like it carried into all sorts of let's go to Europe and all sorts of stuff. But basically in 2007, like I remember Eddie Gomez, he's a purple belt out of Marcelo Garcia's. He basically said, you know what, if you guys are having trouble because of the expansion, because of the lost trailer, that I would like to pay something, maybe like a lifetime pass from you guys. And I had the idea of it, but I had never really heard anyone say they would want to buy such a thing. So Eddie doing it made me say, okay, I'll try to put 10 of these on sales. And then the 10 of them like basically flew off the shelf within like 5 days. As of this morning, my last count, I saw that we have 212 lifetime passes sold. So that's 212 people around the world that want to compete in grappling industries for life.
You guys announced, you know, coming up that you were going to run, you know, pending everything kind of turns out well for all this, that you guys were planning on running Grappling Industries Worlds, your inaugural world tournament. What is kind of the thought process behind running that event? And the interesting thing is you guys made that open registration. If you can get to Dallas to compete, you know, you can compete in this world stage event. Okay, walk me through that. That was crazy to hear about, and I wanted to speak to you since we talked about that on the show when it got announced.
So when we announced it, clearly there was no conversation about coronavirus. That was for sure. So right now, I just want to start off by saying we're trying to save that show. You know, like of all the shows being canceled, that's really not one that I want to cancel, even though that's the most expensive one with absolutely no profit or cash flow coming in for it. It's just an expenditure of money when you think about it. But really what we were thinking was like, not really sure what we were thinking, because on one hand, you're thinking that eventually you need to have these titled events, right? You need to have a Worlds, you need to have a Euros, a Pan Ams or whatever. Really, for me, it was like we need to have a Worlds and Euros eventually. But I don't think they would mean anything because I'm one of those people as well, even though I hate them so much, I love them so much, that the IBJJF has like this stronghold on the Worlds, the Pans, the Euros. But how do you get a similar number to their number? You know, how if I call it Worlds and I keep the registration fees set up as they are and offer no special on the side, then, you know, it might get like 5, 6, 7, 800 competitors. But if I want to get thousands of competitors, how do I do that? So I thought maybe Dallas, Texas in general was an area that we're really trying to expand in right now. We're trying to get more and more Texans on our side, being San Antonio, Houston, Austin, Dallas, basically the whole state. We want the whole state on our side. I always had the idea for like 10 years that a free event would be pretty cool. No one's ever done a free event. The financial plan behind a free event makes no sense. That's the fact of it. You know, when you include having to pay your gas and your plane tickets and your hotels and the referees and the table workers and the medics and the medals, custom medals for the Worlds, which we already bought. They're now stuck in customs because of everything that's happening. It becomes so expensive that with all the events we were running and the profit margins we were running as well, we thought, hey, you know what? If we can do it, why not do it? I mean, that would show people that we were invested in not only our brand, but like the ideas that other jiu-jitsu tournaments have, which is like a worlds. If we can make our worlds free, then there won't be any excuse that, oh, I couldn't afford it, or I couldn't do this, or I needed a sponsor to go there, or I didn't have enough ranking points to qualify. Like, yeah, maybe we could argue that the IBJJF Black Belt Worlds would still mean more. But at the end of the day, the No-Gi Absolute for our Worlds has right now, like, I think 200 people signed up for it. I don't remember. You have to go check the competitors list. But a 200-person No-Gi Absolute, I mean, whoever wins that is legit as fuck. You know what I mean? Let's just be honest about it. The white belts who have to win, like, 12 fights to win their division. That's pretty legit. They should be a blue belt next week, I think the idea has always been about prestige, but in my mind, a proper Worlds is a tournament worth winning that will get you a new belt the week after. And you can't deny a white belt, a blue belt, or a purple belt should be promoted after winning so many fights. So we're taking a round robin tournament and we're making it like on a large scale. Instead of like 500-600 competitors, which is the average in these days, you would be seeing like 2,000 was kind of where we thought we were going to end up. I know this morning it was at 988, but now it's slowing down. Clearly, everything is slowing down. But we were expecting 2,000 competitors. We only had 2 days to put this tournament on. We were thinking that next year we were going to try to do 3-4 days. Later in the year, we were going to go to Poland, go to Warsaw and do a free Euros. So we were playing around with all these ideas. Just right now, it makes the whole thing really complicated, of course, because you were using all the cash flow of the profits from your profitable shows to fund this show that was going to lose money, but was going to be a massive branding opportunity and give all these people an opportunity. They were going to enjoy it. You were going to take over the internet for that weekend in jiu-jitsu. I'm 100% sure we were going to do that. We were working at the streaming deals and everything else with that. But right now, it's hard to really comment on the Worlds. It's not a show that's getting as much worked on right now as every other problem that's arisen. But yeah, that's how we thought of it. And I think like if we still get to hold the Worlds, like we still are, it just depends on like, of course, the Europa Expo that we were within for that weekend. If they don't get shut down, I mean, if the Europa Expo gets shut down, that kind of like kills our show as well. Or if Dallas County or Texas is in lockdown, I mean, clearly we're not going to have our show.
Right.
But in the worst case scenario, I mean, we've already announced it, So even if somehow it gets canceled in June, I think like we've had that conversation like this week as well. What do we do with Worlds if it gets canceled? Do we put it in July or August, or do we do it next year? And it's hard to say. Just everything is like a toss up right now. Because like I said earlier on, like most companies are trying to stop the bleeding right now. Like expenses don't stop. Like our truck leases have not stopped. Our tax bills do not stop. Basically, I think we're still going to have it. It's just a question of do we get to have it in June, or does it have to wait till later in the year, or does it have to wait till next year, for example? But either way, we're having free Worlds. It's just a matter of when is this going to go down.
That's awesome. Again, it was really cool when that first got announced. We all talked about it internally on the Grappling Rewind staff of like, have you seen this? Like, and a bunch of us immediately went, I mean, are we going to get flights and fly down? And then I've talked to a couple people in the local area that are looking at flights and like have registered to go down. So it'll be really interesting. Regardless of if it happens this year or next year, I as a competitor, and what we do is we cover competitive jiu-jitsu on the Grappling Rewind. We are huge fans of what you guys are doing. Speaking about some of the competitive stuff that you put on, occasionally Grappling Industries will put on a super fight, and we've covered a number of the super fights on the show. You guys have had Craig Jones, you guys have had Tim Spriggs, Kit Dale, a bunch of super fights. How do those super fights come to be for Grappling Industries, and how does that work out?
So at first, it was like when we first started as a brand, we had like small super fights, low super fights. That seems like a pretty general idea. If you're going to throw a tournament, you probably have some local super fights, the star elite purple belts going against each other. I think once you're in enough cities, though, such a thing doesn't grab the attention of people. And at that point, we were trying to grab the attention of people. I think the first super fight we ever had that was really, really, really big, that grabbed a lot of attention, was the Eddie Cummings versus Manchir Kira super fight.
Yep.
That was at our first ever Manhattan event. They wanted to do ADCC rules, which I mean I'm not a fan of, but it made for a boring match. It is what it is. From there, we wanted to do more with Eddie, but Eddie is always the type of guy that didn't want to do very much with anybody. I think like we've all seen his career kind of like take a break as well prior to all this. And then from there, we had Gordon competing in tournaments of ours. Like Gordon's first black belt tournament was Grappling Industries Montreal, back when Montreal Jiu-Jitsu was legal to actually produce.
Yeah.
Because now it's not, clearly. That's a whole different conversation. But Gordon, that was his first tournament. And then I think his second tournament was Grappling Industries Manhattan, that first one where Eddie fought Manchir. And then he won the EBI, the Absolutes. And at that point, we had Gordon versus Keenan. The no time limit match that was pretty big that year, actually, when you think about it.
I remember watching that live when that happened, and I remember watched the entire stream live, and it was just crazy to see. I don't think people really realized at the time that matchup happened how pretty unheralded that was. Like, no time limit matches. They were being broadcast with two high-level world stage competitors were not common, and were even less common. Was that in 2017 you guys were in that?
I think it was 2017. I'm not too sure.
I remember that it was before we had begun the Grappling Rewind. I remember that because we actually didn't end up covering that matchup on the show. So it was sometime prior to late 2017. I just remember watching it live and realizing, like, oh, they're really going to let them go as long as this match needs to go. And I think Gordon got him, like the 89th minute or something of that match?
Something like that. It was between 80 and 90 minutes by a heel hook. And that's just something that was so special about that super fight in particular. And I think the super fights that we've tried to produce, they all had different stories. That one in particular was the fact that Keenan was like the no time limit king. Ever since Lloyd Irvin's Kumatai tournament that he had put on YouTube, that I think everyone in Jiu-Jitsu watched at the time.
Yeah.
Which was the top 16 brown belts in the world, and they turned out to be the top 16 brown belts in the world.
And and most of them are top black belts now. I mean, you go back and watch that Kumite event, it holds up. Like Gary Tonen's in there. There's a bunch of other guys. AJ's in there. A bunch of other guys that ended up just being world beaters at black belt are in that tournament. That was no time limit. So yeah, it reminded me of that in the same way that it was two top guys going at it, no time limit.
Yeah, and then like the whole question about that super fight was like, can Gordon actually do this? Like no one gave Gordon an opportunity to actually win that fight. So it was really cool to see. Some people say it's the beginning of like all the Gordon era. I don't know about that or anything like that, but those types of fights, I think we were just trying, because we were so new in the States as well. We might have been like getting bigger in Eastern Canada and in Australia at the time, but we were relatively unknown in the States. And the one thing I learned about the States early on was like, no one knows who you are based on anything you do outside of the country. Even in the States, once we were able to be successful on the East Coast, like I was saying earlier, on the West Coast, they didn't know shit about us. So it was really all about making your name out there, putting your name out there. From there, we went on to some like Craig Jones super fights that you had mentioned, Craig versus Kit Dale in Australia, which was like who's the top Australian at this weight class. Even though they were training partners, they still went pretty hard. And then, of course, Craig Jones versus Tim Spriggs, because Tim, you don't really see Tim get tapped out. And you don't really see Lloyd Irvin guys take no time limit matches. So the fact that Tim took a no time limit match in a match against Craig, who's a leg locker, where we hadn't seen much from Tim yet as far as leg locks, it made for an interesting match of like, is Tim going to smash Craig's guard or dance around it, or is Craig going to get him with something? Each of those matches were big in the city they were promoted in. So Eddie versus Manchir was important because they were both from Manhattan. It was our first Manhattan event. Keenan versus Gordon, same thing. Gordon was becoming a big name in the States. But Keenan was a massive name in the States. We did it in Manhattan. Gordon would be strong. The Henzo crowd came out. Same thing with Craig versus Kit in Australia, big Australian super fight. It was in Melbourne, where they're both from. And even Craig versus Tim Spriggs. that fight was in Philadelphia, which is about an hour away from Tim's home base and an hour away from where Craig was spending a lot of time. And the spectator count on that event went through the roof. Like, there was a lot of people who came out to support that match as well. So I think those types of matches rely on that, like making sure they're in the right city, making sure they're at the right price point. We're not the type of promoters that are like, oh, we want to do any super fight regardless of the fee. The only time we've tried to do something regardless of the fee has been like trying to get Marcelo out of retirement, but that clearly did not work, regardless of how much money we tried to throw at that. Um, it just depends on smart super fights, and at this point, there's a lot of other shows who are like really trying to just do super fights. Third Coast Grappling, Grapple Fest, Polaris, Fight to Win. We want to let them do the super fights. We just do super fights ever so often to stay relevant, basically, and get that branding back in. Can those brands run a tournament like us? Probably not. Clearly, it's two completely different niches. But it doesn't mean we can't do super fights. We clearly can. If we had more distribution on super fights, and to be honest, if competitors actually wanted to fight more often for money, then we would be able to do more of these. But finding guys like Craig Jones who's willing to take a match against anyone any week is pretty rare. And unless you want to go get Gordon Ryan for 20 grand, it's just like, who am I going to get to put against Gordon Ryan, and what's the benefit to me as the promoter who's spending the lion's share on this?
Right.
Yeah.
So you guys recently actually had Gordon at your Arnold Classic event, and there was a lot of discussion about what was happening with the Arnold, and parts of the Arnold ended up being closed, and your event was still able to run there with Gordon who was in that absolute. How did that all come to be? I think that was announced probably 6 or so or more months ago. How did that all come to be with Gordon entering into the absolute there?
I think we're really cool with Gordon. Like when Gordon was a brown belt, he had been teaching and coming to Montreal actually to train with a couple of our guys, Olivier Taza, Ethan Kralestein. They're based out of Montreal, out of TriStar. Gordon was coming to TriStar. I think Olivier and Ethan were telling Gordon about how good Grappling Industries was in Montreal and how it was going to stem up into the States as well. At that point, Gordon started, because Gordon was still competing in tournaments at that point, so just randomly for fun, trying to get his name out there. So he became known to us by winning Grappling Industries Montreal, winning Grappling Industries Manhattan. And then at that point, I think that's when we started the super fights. So that's when we had him fight Keenan. So clearly this is building our relationship with Gordon. We had Gordon booked to fight Todd Buchenheim for a super fight. It was a bet match. Both guys have to bet 10 grand each against each other out of their own money. And then we had Gordon doing the seminar at the first Arnold's. And then we had Craig Jones at the second Arnold's. And then we thought we'd bring it back to Gordon again. So we've had a lot of working relationships with Gordon. We knew that this Arnold's was going to be bigger than all the previous Arnold's, and also the biggest event to ever happen in Ohio as far as a jiu-jitsu tournament. I think we just asked him, and he said yes, to be honest, which is surprising. I think at the same time, I remember a while back, Gordon was saying he wanted more footage for the Fanatics DVDs he was coming out with. He wanted to do some DVDs with them where he would use comp footage to to show the techniques he was showing in other DVDs, or he would show a move and then he'd show it in comp footage. So I think he wanted more of that. So basically we asked him and it all worked out. We were going to get him for the seminar anyway. I think the absolute was a nice little perk on the side. But you don't know unless you ask, right? That's one expression people always use. But like I said, I think we have a good working relationship with him. And I think that by asking him and already having him for the seminar and him needing footage, I think it all just worked out. So he ended up competing in the absolute. He went 5-0, clearly, or won all his matches by submission. And then he gave the seminar the next day, which I think by the final count of people who actually showed up was 168, I think. which is a very big seminar. Originally, I think the seminar was 189, but some dropouts.
Right, through the event. So how did the event at the Arnold's actually end up running? I know that they ended up canceling. Was it the expo part of the Arnold, or was it I forget what was actually canceled at the Arnold?
Yeah. So I wasn't at the Arnold's. First of all, I was in Amsterdam, at the Grappling Industries Amsterdam that weekend. But I clearly know what happened at the Arnold's because I had to take care of the backlash on the back end. At first, earlier that week, Governor DeWine of Ohio, he announced that he was shutting down basically the trade expo. So for those of you that don't know what the Arnold's is, basically there's this massive hall at the Ohio Convention Center, and there's all these vendors and booths. And the thing that's so fun about it, and I remember because I always talk about the Arnold's from a child point of view, because when I was like 15, 16 years old, I went like the 20 hours from Montreal to Columbus and competed in this tournament when it was under the Gracies. So I got to walk around the trade expo, collect all the free samples. I was so excited and stuff. And now here we are, like 15 years later, and I'm in charge of it. But basically, there's this big trade expo, and there's all these competitions like powerlifting, bodybuilding, other sports, and they always do a jiu-jitsu section. In the past, it's been promoted by the Gracies, it's promoted by NAGA, and like just the number has always been dropping off the charts. Like less and less competitors going there, and then like a couple of years ago, they asked us to do it, and we showed up, and the number has consistently been built over the years. You know, for our first year there, we had 500. The next year, we had 750. This year, we had like 1,100 signed up, which are getting to be bigger and bigger numbers when you know the average about jiu-jitsu events in, especially Ohio, where the average is about 200 to 300 people. Getting 1,100 is kind of like a completely different beast. So first, the trade expo got canceled. They didn't want any vendors. They didn't want the traffic of having 200,000 people over 3 days walking through these booths. Everyone's super tight together. There's nowhere to walk, so you'd be breathing on each other. From my understanding, they didn't want all the product that the vendors were selling because that stuff was becoming imported in through China and through other countries. So they were scared that perhaps a lot of these goods would be affected, I would imagine. So at first it was the trade expo, and then the Arnold said, "Okay, we're not going to do the trade expo, but we'll do spectators." But at first they didn't say that because the media decided to jump all over it at once. They were like, "Oh, the trade expo is canceled. There won't be any spectators. Only competitors will be allowed." And even Arnold, I think on Instagram, had posted the same thing, that there won't be any spectators, there won't be any trade expo. There'll just be the sporting events, which wasn't true. It was actually sporting events with competitors and spectators. But then what happened was Governor DeWine again, like a day or two later, decided that he didn't want any spectators in the event at all. He thought that was just going to create a bigger mess still as well, because everyone's just going to say they're a spectator for the sporting events. Which then created this confusion, especially in our crowd, where people want their parents to come, they want their girlfriend to come, they want their wife to come, or their boyfriend, or coaches. Coaches, like a lot of teams were like, "Oh, I'm not going to let my team compete if I can't be there to coach them," which was another problem we ran into, it seems. The Arnolds then came up to the idea that they were going to allow family members who were within the same household and parents who clearly had to watch their kids or they can't compete, and coaches. So all the sporting events were first allowed coaches because I guess it's a thing that people want their coaches. Like I had posted afterwards that I didn't expect the amount of coaches to email us saying how important it was to be there. Like I'm someone who, when I was competing, when I was a competitor, didn't really care about having my coach in my corner at that moment, but it seems like it's a big thing now. Then there was a lot of people who clearly were frustrated. I don't want to come if my boyfriend or my girlfriend can't come, for example, or my parents or this or that. And the Arnolds allowed that in, and they kind of just decided to split up all the events and put them in different parts of the hall, get rid of certain parts of the hall. the whole thing is a mess, clearly, right? Like, like after the second day of dealing with that, like I was already over it, you know. Some people were asking us to cancel our event. I think that's a hard one to ask, to be honest. It would be catastrophic to actually refund such an event, especially an event that was being told that it could still happen. Even the governor at the time, who was shutting down the trade show, wanted the sporting events to happen. He knew how many people were at each sporting event, so it's not like we were lying about it or anything. We had public competitor lists. I mean, you could see how many people there were going to be there. Um, but I mean, as long as like the governor told us we were fine, the Arnolds told us we were fine, they put all these precautions in place. Like, we were not really in a position at that moment that we could cancel, and so that's why we ended up going on with the event, I suppose.
Yeah, I was just curious because I know that was right. You were caught right in the middle of everything starting through, and that was our understanding as well. Is that you guys did what you was recommended to you by the jurisdictions that you were in, and so it's nice to actually hear that from you. So moving forward into the rest of 2020, I know we're still in somewhat of a unknown territory. What what happens in the meantime? What is Grappling Industries? Are you guys currently doing any other things aside from just sort of managing the current event load?
So I had like a flash like a couple of days ago where it was like, right now it seems like a lot of people are in the motion of like, we need to shut down everything, we need to stop the expenditures, we need to find a way to make some cash flow. We're kind of like, we've kind of taken control of all that. So now it's like, oh, what do you want us to do? Just sit around and wait for this all to be okay again? We're starting to work on innovation again. We're starting to work on what new ideas can we implement. And this can be done, like a lot of the stuff that you were holding off on throughout the year can be done right now. Like, this is a good time for everyone to do like their cleaning break of their company, for example. So talking to all our employees and getting their ideas. This is a good time to be doing that. You know, it's kind of harder to do it when everyone's in like full load work. So I've been spending a lot of time talking to a lot of my employees, trying to find out what they recommend, what difficulties they had that we can fix or easily make accessible for people. Looking at our production, which parts are outdated and can be updated. What are new cool things that we could do that no one has done before? Just use it as a time of creative and innovative. But also talk to everyone and get everyone on the same team. Because I promise you that like, you're gonna see a lot of other businesses right now lose their employees. I mean, that's the really unfortunate thing about all of this, is that especially when we're talking about gyms, not everyone can survive this. And I think that's the depressing part about the whole thing, is that like, there will be a lot of gyms that don't open after this, especially if this gets turned into 2 or 3 months. So the first, I wanted to make sure my employees had money, work out their pay schedules with them, seeing what we could provide them, seeing how we could help them, and getting their feelings, not just on their situations, because I care about these people. I mean, there's 15 of them that all they do is work for Grappling Industries. The last 8 of the 15 of them actually quit their other jobs when they joined Grappling Industries. So there's a lot of like loyalty here. And I feel like I need to be very present right now to them. I need to be able to answer their calls and talk with them for an hour or two if that's what they need. But we're looking to just strengthen our unit and strengthen our product so that when we come back, and I feel like it's safe to say that eventually, like, everything in economy is going to return back to normal. We just don't know when that will be, of course. But when we do, there's going to be like a massive rush on this. And there's going to be every jiu-jitsu tournament that was doing this full time, the people like NAGA and IBJJF and the AGF and Third Coast Grappling, like even the superfight shows, they're all going to try to announce shows right away. I mean, there's going to be a run on announcing shows, and everyone's going to book over each other at first. It's going to be like the old days. That's where we were thinking about the 4 to 5 week delay, because no one's going to sign up for a tournament next week if you announce tomorrow, that everything is all right again. But getting that all set up and then making sure that when we're back into the fluidity of things, that everything is like running just as it was before or even better. Because a lot of people have made a lot of cuts to their companies right now, and we're trying not to cut anything out. We're trying to keep it where it was or even better. So we're trying to act like business as usual right now without it being business as usual. That would be the best way to say how I think we're trying to get through this. We want to come out with an improved product afterward. And once we get the ball rolling and everything is back to normal for Grappling Industries, and I think we've already just started discussing around here maybe ways we can help certain gyms that have been affected or competitors that have been affected. It's hard to say right now because like I've been saying, it's like so many businesses, even the strong ones right now, are like pulled back from everything. Like there's clearly like now's not the time that I'm going to go find a new sponsor. I can sell lifetime passes, like I said before, because those are goods being sold to people who still have jobs. But once we get the registrations coming in and stuff like that, then I think that we'll be able to continue on with our innovation and growth.
That's awesome to hear. Hey, David, I really appreciate the time you gave me. I really appreciate what you guys are doing for the sport and the community. I am personally a huge fan of your events. We love covering your super fights. I love competing at your events. I love coaching at your events. It's really great, and I cannot thank you enough for the time that you gave us here. I think we'll definitely try to talk to you again at some point in the future on the show. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too, man. Thank you for all the support you've given to our tournaments, and thank you for giving us the outlet to speak about this. It's appreciated.
Thank you. So that does it for this week's show, for the most part. Josh, what are you doing this week for quarantine?
Working, actually going into work. Doing stuff, making things, cooking more stuff, but also working in a production capacity. So I'm fortunate enough that I still have a job to go to while working in the food industry, unlike some other people. So hopefully everybody in that industry is staying strong. And then probably forcing my children to stand there while I do moves to them so I can keep sharp and not get beat up.
Josh, you're saying you don't have mats in your basement that you can roll out with the purple belt you live with?
No, I don't.
Man, it's on you, man. Zach, what are you doing this week?
Working from home. Mostly playing around with pretty pictures of brains, writing some stuff. The little work that I can do as a scientist that's not in a lab, and sleeping in a little bit.
Nice. Yeah, I'm also working from home. I'm basically working at the podcast set all day because it's actually my desk for work. And then I work all day, and then we sat down to do the podcast. So I've been at this chair for literally like 10 hours today. And I'm going to walk 2 feet over to the mats here in a second and train with Rachel probably here in a bit because...
Suck it.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Everyone hates me right now, which I think is kind of funny because I live with 2 purple belts and myself. So we can actually still train, and everyone absolutely just hates me.
I'm gonna come and cough all over your door handles.
How about not? That'd be dope. So yeah, keep supporting jiu-jitsu gyms. Keep paying membership if you can. We talked about it last week. If you haven't listened to last week's show, it's a lot of fun. It kind of goes off the rails in a way like we usually don't do. The next shows in the future are going to be a little different. Actually, going to be very different from the shows that we do, but we will continue to put out shows for you to listen to during this time. Keep watching jiu-jitsu. Stay up with it. Jiu-jitsu is going to be here when everything is done and over with. So stay in the community. We just got to get through this tough time in general, but that's all I've got. You guys got anything else?
Nope.
All right. As always on the show, I'm your host, Maine, with my co-host,
Josh,
and our other co-host,
Zach.
And we are the Grappling Rewind. We will see you on the mats when you return to the mats. If you like the show, please consider sharing it on Facebook with the folks at your gym. It's the best way that we grow the show, and we really appreciate it. You can reach out to us on email.
We also have Instagram. We have Facebook. We have Twitter. We have Google Plus.
Until that shuts down.
We have a website.
If you have an event you would like to have us cover, please let us know. If you have a name, like most people do, and you'd like to have us stop butchering it,
Let us know.
reach out to us. The show is also available on YouTube, Spotify, in addition to iTunes and every other podcast service. We very much appreciate your time, and thank you.